Cool. So thanks everyone for joining today. My name's Jared. I'm from the Resource Recovery Group. I'm the waste educator here. And right next to me is Brendan Doherty from Resource Recovery Group as well. We're at the Materials Recovery Facility here in Canning Vale, where we process recycling through the kerbside system. It is National Science Week, so happy National Science Week. The theme this year is on glass. And so here at Recycle Right and Resource Recovery Group, we thought we would put on a webinar focusing on glass recycling in Western Australia, which is pretty exciting. So we're joined today by an expert panel, experts within the waste industry here. We've got Brendan Doherty, of course, from Resource Recovery Group, who is the Executive Manager of Strategic Projects. So Brendan will be talking about curbside recycling and what happens to glass here in WA through the curbside stream. We've also got Natasha Rogers from Worrell. So she's the manager of waste innovation over there at Worrell, who'll be talking about glass recycling through containers for change, which is really cool. And then last but not least, we've also got Evan Cox from Total Green Recycling. So he is the general manager of recycling over there, and he'll be talking about recycling glass through electronic waste, which is really cool as well. So how it'll work is each of our presenters will present, and we'll have 5 minutes at the end of each of the presentations for some questions. And then at the end of the session, we'll have even more time for questions and discussion. So feel free to write any questions that you have into the chat. And then also at the end of the presentations, you can take yourself off mute and just ask a question as well. Awesome. All right, so just give us 2 seconds. Just going to share screen. Brendan is going to be presenting first. Okay, can you all see the screen there? Presentation? Yep. Awesome. All right, over to Brendan.
All right, thanks, Jared, and good morning, everyone. So I'm going to talk about glass, which gets collected in your recycling bin. So I'm assuming everyone's got a yellow top bin at home, and you'd be putting your glass as well as other containers and paper and cardboard, that sort of thing. So let's get into it. So first slide is, it's a fairly obvious statement, and I'm assuming most people would know that glass is basically melted sand. So that means that if we don't recycle glass, we have to go and dig more sand. And even though in Perth and Western Australia and Australia generally, we've got a lot of sand, but you can see from this report, which was done by the United Nations Environment Program back in 2019, when you look at it globally, like a lot of things, water and clean air and everything else, it is a limited resource, and so we should be trying to, as far as possible, reuse everything that we can. So that's why we're focusing on how to best recycle glass that we've already created. So I wanted to click there we go. All right, so just to give you a bit of an idea of what gets picked up, generally your recycling bin would probably get picked up every second week, so every fortnight. And about a third of what people put in is actually glass, and that's going to be mainly glass bottles and glass jars. And when you look at the across Perth and Western Australia, there's quite a lot of glass. I've estimated about 80,000 tonnes just in that system. And some of our other speakers will talk about glass in other systems, and it's around about 1 million bottles and jars every day. That's all that pasta sauce, olives, beverage drinks, and all that kind of thing. So it's a lot of glass, and that glass is recovered by 3 materials recovery facilities, which is one where we're here, and there's 2 others in Perth, and we abbreviate that as an MRF or a MRF. So I might refer to an MRF or a MRF, which is basically where we recover the glass and separate it from everything else. So how do we actually recover the glass in the MRF? Well, you can see the first picture up in the top left there, that's what the material looks like after it comes out of your bin. So a lot of it is paper and cardboard, and then there's plastic and metal cans and all that kind of thing as well. So initially we put it on a conveyor belt, and we have trained people with all the right protective equipment, gloves and masks and glasses and everything else, who inspect the material and remove anything which shouldn't be in the bin or going through the process. So they're protected. They know how to deal with broken glass. So don't worry if you're putting broken glass in the bin. That's not a problem. We know how to deal with that. And it's actually part of the breaking the glass is actually part of the process, which I'll show you. So first part of the process is we inspect everything coming in, and generally all the glass will go straight past that process. So from here, most of the separation is about separating flat things from round things. So obviously paper and cardboard is basically flat, whereas containers are round. So we have a series of screens with discs which allow the paper and cardboard to float over the top, and the containers fall below the gaps in the discs. Now with the glass, we want to get that out up front because it can be quite damaging to equipment. So you can see in the bottom of the screen there, it talks about the glass breaker screen. So the glass bottles fall down, and because they're brittle and fragile, they actually shatter on these steel rollers, and all the little pieces fall through, and all the other containers keep going on their journey to another part of the plant. So basically how we do it is we break the glass and separate it because it becomes a much smaller piece. So from there, you can see that on the conveyor on the left there, that's all the glass with some contamination, which I'll talk about shortly, goes off to the back of our plant where we basically, first of all, we remove all the metallic items. So we have a magnet. So you can see all those, bottles and lid jars made of metal, which are extracted by a magnet, and that gets recycled. And then from there, we actually put it through a screening process. So the first part of the screening process is we blow air across the glass, which removes lightweight material, and then we put it through a trommel, which is basically a screen or a sieve rotating with holes in, and the glass falls through, which is predominantly less than about 2 inches in size, or 50 or 60 millimeters and all that. And then there's a screen in 2 sizes, and then it's ready to go off to another plant, which then turns it into what we want to use back in building construction projects. So that's pretty much what the fine glass looks like down the bottom there, and it then needs to be further processed. Now, I just want to point out we produced 2 grades of glass. One is a finer material, which you saw on the previous slide, but this is the coarser grade, and you can see that the coarser grade has all the things that people have put in their recycling bin, which we don't want them to do, which is things like straws, plastic lids, even shredded paper is a problem. And so all those small items and toys, you can see someone's put a cigarette lighter, whole range of things. Anything small tends to be a problem for us in the glass. So if it's not recyclable, or if it's too small, we want you to put that in your red lidded bin. And at the moment that currently goes to landfill, but it will be used for the production of energy shortly once that facility is constructed. Okay, so small things are a problem in a MRF, and this is predominantly where they end up. Now the next phase, we can deal with it, but we'd prefer you put it in the red bin, and we'll get to the next phase, which is where we send it to a plant where it's basically crushed in a metal crushing machine, which makes it very fine like sand, and all that contamination then can be screened off because it's a different size. So ultimately, we end up with something which basically looks like sand, but it was originally made from sand, but it's now a slightly different product, which is glass, and it's entirely suitable just to replace sand in a whole range of construction projects, which is where we predominantly use this stream. So for example, it might just be used as bulk fill under a road or a car park, and it's actually very good in asphalt. It actually improves the skid resistance of asphalt. So it actually can improve the performance of asphalt or the bitumen which you drive on the road. So it's actually a very useful product, and we reuse 100% of it back locally in Perth. So I think that's pretty much everything on my side, Jared. So I'll hand it back to you. No worries.
Yeah, thanks, Brendan. So I'm just going to stop sharing. All right, that was great. Does anyone have any questions for Brendan on recycling through the curbside when it comes to glass? Feel free to type in the chat, or you can take yourself off mute, just ask a question. I know today we are joined by a couple of high schools, including John Curtin. Hello, John Curtin students. Please feel free to ask any questions that you might have about glass recycling. Awesome, and we've also got a question from Northern Senior High School. How much glass is recycled in a year?
So in one of my early slides, I talked about it. I estimated across Western Australia, there's 3 recovery facilities, and probably about 80,000 tonnes is something like that. It's about a third of all of the recycling that people are putting in their recycling bins, and it's just to give you a feel for it, is about 1 million bottles and jars a day people are actually putting in their recycling bin. So it's a lot of pasta sauce.
I like that. So we had a question from John Curtin as well. Does any of the glass that is recycled, is it turned back into bottles, and do the glass products need to be washed? That's a great question. So given that when it comes to recycling glass through the kerbside system, it's a commingled system, everything's mixed in together. It's a bit of a different setup, whereas we're about to get onto Natasha's presentation soon at Containers for Change. It's a bit of a different setup when it comes to separating glass, and there's more opportunities to recycle glass back into glass. But Natasha can elaborate a bit more on that soon. So from Georgia, different local governments would have different acceptance of glass depending on where their glass is going.
So if you're not, there's a site which Resource Recovery Group have created, and it's called Recycle Right. And if you go to Recycle Right, it'll tell you, there'll be an A to Z list, and it will tell you what to do with different things, including glass. And it's a consistent communication across all of Western Australia, and all of the 3 materials recovery facilities have agreed on a consistent approach to glass. So if you follow the A to Z list on the Recycle Right, you can get an app on your phone, so you can just look at it on your phone. That will tell you exactly what to do with glass.
Great. And from Ali in Melbourne, they are starting to add another bin just for glass. Would you prefer that to happen in WA?
I think I don't think we're ready for a 4th bin, to be honest. We've got a very good container deposit scheme where we can separate glass into high quality, and as I've spoken about, we have a very effective system for the yellow top bin. So in Western Australia, I don't think we need a 4th bin at the moment, but that Melbourne has obviously chosen in their local conditions, might also be related to some of the other products they're collecting, such as paper. They may prefer not to have glass with the paper, but from our perspective, we're able to recycle and sell all of our products over here.
Great. And another question from Northern Senior High School. Where should we put shredded paper and small rubbish if they shouldn't be in the recycling bin?
All right, so if you're in Northern, I'm assuming you have a 2-bin system, so you may not have a 3rd bin, what we call FOGO, which is food organics and garden organics. So if you had a 3rd bin for food and garden organics, then we would recommend the shredded paper goes in there because it's perfect for composting. If you only have 2 bins, then you would be limited to putting it into your green bin, or you could compost it at home or somewhere else. In terms of small items, certainly if you can reuse or repurpose them, but otherwise they will need to go in your general waste bin, which if you're on a 2-bin system would be a green bin. If you've got 3 bins, it's the red lidded bin, and that material will be used for the creation of energy A lot of those materials are small plastic items, which is high embodied energy, and that's where we're looking to send that in the next year or so.
Great. Wow, lots of questions coming through. We got another one from Pam. I heard that the Albany recycling bin glass actually gets sent to South Australia to be recycled back into glass. Is this true?
Would have to ask the City of Albany. I know that Cleanaway are operating. I believe Cleanaway are operating down there, and if they're separating it by hand, so there's no contamination, then they may well be able to do, and this is probably what Natasha will talk about, is to actually send it to South Australia. But if it's mixed with other materials, they're not. So off the top of my head, I wouldn't be able to answer the question, but yeah, perhaps a question for City of Albany.
Great. And thanks, Evan. Yep. So some New South Wales councils do a separate paper bin too. Perfect. Okay. And thanks, Liz, for sending through the Recycle Right website A to Z list link there in the chat. Great. Okay. Great questions, everyone. So yeah, keep them coming. We're going to move on now to Natasha Rogers from Worrell, who'll be talking about glass recycling through containers for change. So over to you, Natasha.
Thank you very much, Jared. That was really interesting, Brendan, and it's good to see what happens at the other end. So I'll just share my screen. So I'm hoping that you can all see that.
Yep, perfect.
Okay, so my name's Natasha Rogers. I'm the Waste Innovation Manager at Worrell. So I look after recyclers and MRFs, and also waste innovation and bin infrastructure throughout the containers for change. So just a really quick overview of what I'll be talking about today is the greener guarantee that Containers for Change has around recycling of products, where the actual flow of material through the scheme, how it works through the scheme and how we separate it, why it is actually better to recycle glass rather than to do refill. And this is coming off some of the questions we get asked quite regularly from the general public coming through our info line. And then I've got a short video at the end, which will show you where the glass containers go through to the Gawler processing plant. So you get to see the bottles being fired. So the greener guarantee, this was developed because we wanted to basically communicate to the general public that Worrell in itself and the containers, the whole container deposit scheme is 100% committed to making sure that all the products that we receive through the container, all the refund points throughout WA, of which there's about 253, I think now, and they can be depots or drop points or container exchange points. You may have seen baskets all over the place. So there's a lot of different configurations. We're guaranteeing that they are actually 100% recycled through those points, and it's actually sent to recyclers who will turn it either back into a bottle or into a product that is able to be then recycled again. So this is what we have made a commitment to. It's something that keeps me awake at night because I'm responsible for this. So we actually do a lot of due diligence with our recyclers to make sure that they are actually recycling the product and that they're turning it into a recyclable product again. So how it actually all works. So as I said, there's like 253 different refund points across. So this is very different to the kerbside, which Brendan was talking about. So when you take your glass bottles into any refund point in WA, they then get separated out. They're aggregated at that point. They're then picked up by a processor. Remondis is our processor, logistics, sorry, and they take them to WA Glass. WA Glass then beneficiates it. Now, beneficiating means that it's actually crushed, and you'll see a bit of this process in the video. It's crushed and then separated into 4 different color streams. So you have an amber, a green, a flint, and a clear, and it's then loaded into containers and sent across to South Australia to a bottling reprocessing plant in South Australia, in Gawler, and then the actual fines are then sent to the beverage manufacturers, which they then make bottles and then go back into bottles to be sent back to WA. So the whole process, we are actually able to, since October, since the scheme started in October 2020, we've processed 46,000 tonnes through this process. This doesn't include what has come through the MRF system. This is only through the refund points, and all of that glass we normally have, it's about 2%, which if for some reason or other has become heavily contaminated with the skips. Sometimes we've had accidents where there's been blue metal accidentally put into a skip, or if it's very heavily contaminated, the Gawler factory will not take it. So we have to be very careful. If it is, it's then sent to a local reprocessor in WA, and it's been turned into sand. So one way or the other, that product is actually being recycled. For the glass that's in the Kimberley's areas and in the Pilbara, that glass is actually, we're looking at working with a earth moving company up there and with Main Roads Department to set up at the moment it's brought down to Perth, but in the future we're looking at how we can actually do a localized recycling of that product in that area to, again, replace the need for sand in so many of these areas where there's a sand shortage. So we're actually looking at different innovation in that, in the glass reprocessing throughout WA. The reason why glass, and we get asked this quite a lot, is why not just refill a bottle, and why can't we move all the glass bottles and go back to how it used to be, where we used to have glass bottles and then take it back to our delis and then they'd refill it and then send it back out to us again. There's a lot of reasons why. One of them is that through the life cycle of refilling glass on that process, just the environmental footprint of the transport and logistics to move glass bottles around in itself is very problematic. Secondly, that it was actually withdrawn around contamination in the glass bottles themselves. People were using them for things like putting petrol in them. There was a lot of foreign substances being used in these bottles, then going back into the to be refilled. So there was a lot of issues around health and safety. But the biggest issue was just the sheer transporting of glass, because it's a very heavy product, very problematic to move around in trucks and shipping containers as a whole bottle. But they actually also, there's been a lot of comparative studies in Europe and also Australia going through the life cycle of a bottle and for the CO2 emissions that recycling glass has over using virgin sand to create the glass. You've got less energy needed to melt the cullet of the recycled process. It actually replaces some of the materials when it's broken down in the furnace. And then it doesn't need to be, as I said before, you don't need to be moving like in this case, 1.2 tons of virgin material doesn't need to be quarried, processed and transported. What this actually does is with the manufacturing of glass, we're seeing manufacturers of glass reprocessing move to a more sustainable position. And in particular, the glass processor in South Australia, Aurora, they have now moved to 100% wind powered. So they're looking at have a more sustainable future in themselves, and they collectively generate 770 megawatts of solar power, which is fantastic because that means that they're now not using that electricity and coal-fired electricity. And because of the clean stream of glass we've been able to provide them in WA, they've now made a commitment to increase their recycled glass content in their bottles from 40 to 70%. Now, it's important to understand that when you recycle a bottle to bottle, it is not going to be one bottle equals one bottle at the other end. And this is a very common question that people ask. With all the bottles, as through the process, they can't use 100% recycled content in every single bottle. There's a lot of reasons for that. Often the quality and the grades of the glass are different. So they need to have a mix of virgin and also recycled. But at 40 or 7 and moving to 70%, it's a much better outcome than using 100% virgin glass. Hold on, just gone back. Where's my little, sorry, just gone forward too far. No, sorry. Okay, so I'm just going to show you a little video of what actually happens to the glass. So hopefully this works. I haven't ruined it. All right. Make that bigger. No, someone go bigger. Can you see all of that? Yeah.
Yeah, and do. Yeah.
Okay, so that sort of gives you an idea of what happens in the through the process, and that's it. That's all from me. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
That was great. Thank you so much, Natasha. Love the video as well. All right, so I'm just having a look through the, oh yeah, just having a look through the questions now. We had a couple come through. So from Pam, so once transport is powered with renewables, will reuse and refill systems be reconsidered?
So the short answer to that, probably on a more localized level, but if you're still moving large volumes from WA, for example, to South Australia and back again, I don't think it's going to be practical on a practical level, but definitely localized. And you're seeing some localized bottling, rebottling programs, definitely with milk. I've seen that happening in WA. And I'd say, given that where we are, once you get that localized for very niche areas. But yeah, I mean, if we can, who's to say going into the future that it can't be achieved? I'm not going to say no to it. It'd be great if it could.
Yeah, definitely. So Evan asked the question, I think it was during when the video was playing, is that a noisy plant?
Yes, so yes, the WA glass plant is incredibly noisy and also dusty because you have glass dust. So when they're actually, anyone working in that plant has to be fully equipped with not just your normal PPE, but also very high-tech dust filters on their masks, because you've got glass dust, which you do not want in your lungs. So yeah.
Okay, and Shaka, what happens to all the metal lids?
So all the metal lids, so what we've actually got a very fantastic program that we work with Total Green on, and all the lids that are put into every refund point in WA is brought down to Total Green in Canning Vale, and no, not Canning Vale. Is it Canning Vale? No, it's
Welshpool, yeah.
Welshpool. And then all the metal is taken out of them, and then the plastic goes to a local reprocessor called Claw. They palletize it, and then they actually send it to a local manufacturer that turns it into building products, which can and is then recycled again at end of life. And all the metal is then sent to metal recyclers. So yeah, we're actually the only scheme in Australia that has a comprehensive recycling program for lids, of which we're all very, very, very proud of. So if you do have your lids, don't put them in the little bin. If you've got an opportunity, don't put them in your general waste bin. If you've got an opportunity, take them to a refund point. It includes all the beverage lids. So we just don't take all your lids from Vegemite jars and all the other ones. So it's all any beverage lid you can take to a refund point.
Great, it's good to know. So John Curtin, they've asked, so it's not glass related, but it is containers for change related. What happens to the other 10-cent containers like Up and Go bottles and juice boxes?
So this is a great question because this is a very commonly asked question. Currently, what happens to them is the only outlet for them was to send them to Spain. However, I've been working with a social enterprise called SaveBoard, and I can now tell this publicly because it's now definitely finalised. I've just been working with them this week. So we are actually sending all of our liquid paperboard. So all the juice boxes are called liquid paperboard. And you've got the juice boxes or your milk cartons. They will now be sent to this company who have a plant in New Zealand, but they're also setting one up in New South Wales where it's crushed and it will actually be turned into a building sheet. And then it's also, you can turn it into furniture and a whole lot of other different amazing products, which will then be sold back into Australia. So that's a really good outcome.
That's great. And Ali has asked a question, do the labels need to be removed from the bottles? No, that all gets removed through the processes. So they have a very similar process where, again, move with air and they take the air off and they remove all that at the other end. So no. Awesome. And the John Curtin students have asked another question. How many times can glass bottles be recycled? Is there a limit on how many times bottles can be recycled?
No, because you're not using 100% recycled product every time, it can be recycled indefinitely. Same with aluminium.
Amazing. And thanks, Chloe. What happens if the glass breaks prior to arriving at the recycling plant?
That's not a problem at all. It all gets picked up and put onto the belts and it gets crushed anyway. So it just means that they've got to do less crushing. So it doesn't make any difference. When you take it to a refund point, however, if you can keep it as whole as possible, we do understand there are some breakages somewhere in transport. And what happens with that is if we do see broken glass, when you take it into a drop point or you drop it off at a drop point, is we count the necks. So if we see the neck in there, that's what's counted at the refund point as a whole bottle.
Great. And Sharko has asked, is there a plan to expand the container deposit scheme to wine bottles?
Yeah, also very commonly questioned. I think once it becomes national, the schemes become national. So with Victoria going through the process at the moment, Tasmania is about to come on board. Once it's nationalised, there is conversation between all the scheme operators already, and South Australia has already been doing a review around including wine bottles. It will actually probably also include spirit wine bottles. And there's also questions around, and there's an assessment being made around milk bottles. But milk bottles is a bit different. There's GST implications with milk bottles. So that'll require a lot more assessment. Yeah, but there is conversation about it. I'm not going to say yes or no, but there is definitely assessment going on about that across all the schemes in Australia.
Great. Yeah. And so this is similar to do with wine bottles. I suppose you could maybe elaborate a bit more on containers for change and what the target items are and why items are eligible, why items aren't eligible at the moment, including wine bottles. But I suppose you can, answer it a bit more broadly.
Yeah, so across the actual scheme originally, the whole container deposit scheme was set up in South Australia originally 42 years ago, and it was designed as an anti-litter scheme. So everything was defined by what would you ordinarily carry on your person out and about and not consumed within a household. So that was always the defining criteria on what was accepted and what wasn't accepted. So it was assumed that you would not be walking around the streets with a bottle of wine in your hand and a bottle of Jim Beam. Now I know there are exceptions to that. However, for the general public, most people do not walk around with a bottle of wine in their hands. The same with very large 3-litre bottles of fresh juice. You would ordinarily consume that within the home. You wouldn't ordinarily consume that out and about. So it was designed purely for that, because within the home, those items can very effectively be recycled through your commingled bin within a household. Your 3-litre orange juices, which is a very common, your 100% juices, which is a very common question. Yeah. So that's sort of what the criteria was when it was first set up. There are obviously, as we've evolved as a society and our behaviours have changed a little bit, and this is why these assessments are being made. But anything that we do has to have a national implication, because the labelling is done from mostly national bodies. So we need to be able to do it nationwide. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
So there was, a couple more questions on labels and stickers, but we did cover that already. So there's another question from Pam just to do with lids. So other types of lids, such as milk bottled lids or wine bottled lids, accepted through Containers for Change?
Yes, so both of those, yep, we accept those through Containers for Change. The wine bottle lids get removed and recycled through the Total Green processes, and the other lids get recycled through Claw. Yep. Yeah, try to keep out the corks though. Don't put corks in there, because unfortunately they behave like plastic when it's going through the water filtration system, and it's very hard. They can't pull it out with the magnet, so try not to put that, and also the wire cages that corks come in. So keep those out.
and loose lids, please. Loose lids, not in plastic bags.
Yeah, no plastic bags. Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And so another question from Northam Senior High School. Are the Containers for Change collection bins made from recycled materials?
Yes, so the actual lids, so there's two parts to that question, because there's multiple different bin infrastructure systems. So in every single refund point, there's a little black bins that they've all been supplied with, which collect lids. They are 100% made out of recycled lids. I worked very hard with Sulo to actually achieve that, which was a great project. All the other bins that we use through the lime green and the blue bins that are used in the refund points and also out and about, they're made from 40% recycled HDPE, and that's through Maztec in South Australia. So we do use as much recycled content where we can and where it's practical and doesn't, it meets all the standards. So yes, as much as we possibly can. Also the bags themselves, the collection bags, the green collection bags that you'll be handed out, they are made from 100% recycled polypropylene. So yeah, yes, they are.
That's great. So Pam's also asked, I believe non-eligible bottles and jars dropped at specific glass collection points, such as Balcatta Recycling Centre and Tamala Park, are also sent to South Australia for processing. Is this true?
I don't know what arrangements those recovery sites have separately, but they're not sent through to South Australia via the Containers for Change scheme, no. So I can't answer that definitively, I'm sorry.
No worries. John Curtin students have asked, why is it that we send glass recycling to South Australia rather than having it here recycled? Sorry, having it recycled here.
And this is a really great question. And this also applies right across the entire recycling infrastructure and landscape, is that for these sorts of factories require a very large volume to be sustainable. You're talking about a very expensive setup. Millions and millions of dollars are expended in this. To be able to achieve the quality of output, you need to have a factory at a scale that can actually achieve that output. So therefore, you actually need the volumes. We don't have enough volume just in WA to have a separate manufacturing plant just in WA. The South Australia plant will also service South Australia, Victoria, and WA. And you've also got a lot of the beverage industry has set up in South Australia. So the movement from the plant to the bottling is very minimal. And then the actual full bottles then get distributed across the country from South Australia. So that's why, and it applies to all other recycling. You'll see, plastic recycling, metal. We don't have an aluminium recycling plant in WA either, for that very same reason. Our population and the volumes that we have here just will not sustain a recycling plant that's required. Yeah.
No worries. And another question from Pam, does the foamy plastic disc need to be removed from inside the wine bottle lids prior to drop off?
It's not essential. It's a nice to have, but it's not an absolute need to have. It does definitely help the recycler, helps Claw, because they've got to screen that out. They screen it out through their processes. And again, it behaves and looks like plastic. So, but the actual foam is very difficult to recycle because it's normally three different types of plastic. And a lot of the foam, especially the Brown's Dairy foam inserts, they've actually got a PVC lining, and then you've got a polypropylene and the polystyrene center. So that is very problematic to try and recycle, and it gets screened out. Yeah. So it's a nice to have, but not necessarily a need to have. There are processes in place to already screen it out.
If they're in the alley wine lids, though, the aluminium ones, you might as well just leave them on, because they'll just get burnt off in the furnace when it's melted down into new alley.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. And there was one more question here by the looks of it. So from Akash, how are the bottles cleaned? Is it just by water or any chemicals or other solution used for cleaning?
So the bottles are you talking about cleaned in terms of to refill, or cleaned in terms of to take the labels off to recycle? The question there, but either one, it's with her refilling. I will have no clue what they use with that one. If they do, they'd obviously have to. In terms of the recycling, they have caustic processes that will take that off, but also just through the smelting, actually just gets burnt off anyway. So yeah.
Great. All right. Thanks very much, Natasha.
Not a problem. Great questions.
Yeah. Keep the questions coming, everyone. So we're going to move on to Evan now from Total Green Recycling to talk about recycling glass through e-waste or electronic waste.
Yep, thanks, Jared, and thanks everyone so far for your contributions, Brendan and Natasha. It's been great to sort of get a holistic sort of view on glass recycling for, I guess, where glass is really coming through in its predominance in society. I'll really be keeping it specific to electronic waste, where we do see a bit of glass. Yeah, I'll just share my screen now. And everyone can see that okay? Good.
Yeah, looks great.
Excellent. Alrighty, so yeah, I'm Evan from Total Green Recycling. Thanks for having me to speak today. I'll be talking about glass recycling, specifically through the realm of end-of-life electronics. Just a little bit about us, about Total Green Recycling. So we're a business that's based in Welshpool. We're the principal recycler for electronic waste in WA. And it's a business that started with pretty humble beginnings. It was sort of two brothers in a back shed in the Perth Hills without their father's knowledge. Started processing electrical odds and ends off the verge. And really from there, a business case was made, and they turned it into a business, and it grew through that period up to 2020, where the growth was such that they were able to really hit the ground running, and we've got two really big facilities now employing over 50 people. So it's been a great success story. And as you can see from this graph, it's just simply our e-waste over time that's come through our door that we've recycled. You can see from when we started gathering the data in 2015, all just FYI, all the data I'm providing in this slideshow is from 2015, where it started getting captured in our database. You can just see over time how the e-waste has grown with the business, and we're up to a point now where we're doing 3 million kilos of e-waste per annum, just from sort of the WA region. And our sort of research into this shows that this isn't really even close to the sort of e-waste that's getting generated by the community every year. So it's a big problem or opportunity, depending on how you look at it. Generally speaking, just some brief overview on the sorts of things that we recover from e-waste. This is certainly not a full list, but we recover steel as a big commodity, circuit boards that contain gold and silver and those precious metals that you always hear about. The non-ferrous metals like aluminium and copper from the different components. These are all getting taken out through mechanical processes and sent away for further recycling. And of course, there's glass. which we're talking about today. But yeah, just wanted to stress that this is not an exhaustive list. I think there's anywhere up to 50 different streams that we're keeping track of commodities that we're taking out of e-waste. So yeah, it's a pretty broad waste stream. So the question is, when did TGR start recycling glass and why? Well, when we think about glass in e-waste, you know, you kind of have to be recycling glass from the word go, because the CRT TV, the old style TVs, have toxic lead in them. So to recycle it responsibly, you have to be recycling the glass. So it's this leaded glass that was the real driver for glass recycling at TGR. Now, I just want to take a minute to talk about what CRTs are, because I know there's high school students in today, and I actually went to John Curtin, so it's cool to see the John Curtin team in the presentation. CRTs were sort of a thing when I was a kid. I'm 31 now, so I can guarantee that people probably aren't really knowing what CRTs are anymore. So I'll take a little time to explain what a CRT is. And I've included this historical photo where you can see the use of a CRT at a workstation here, way back when, probably in the 80s or the 70s or somewhere along those lines. A CRT is shorthand for a cathode ray tube, which is basically an old type of technology that was used in early televisions and monitors, where a thick glass case was, you know, had electrons passing through it to convey images onto a screen. The glass at the back of that CRT is sort of like a leaded glass with a lead paint on it, and it's typically anywhere from 12 to 28% lead by weight. So these things are heavy, and that lead needs to be dealt with. Now, just back into the preso about glass. Glass comes in many different forms in e-waste. There's the two forms that you get in a CRT. So there's the leaded glass at the back of that CRT piece, and then there's the panel glass at the front. Those are really the glass streams that TGR focuses on from a recycling standpoint. Those are the ones that we can say are definitely managed and recycled. The other glass contained within e-waste is not either economically viable to separate and recycle, or it's just frankly not a recyclable product in itself. And when I say we don't recycle it, it will go through our mechanical system, and it will get screened out. It'll get broken up, much like we saw at Brendan's facility. It'll get broken up, and it will become a dust, and it will get screened out. That goes into fines, which are then sent off for smelting, but they're not recovered as any sort of glass product. So I'm not going to say that we put it in the bin. We don't do that, but it's certainly not recycled in a traditional sense. Okay. So just speaking about leaded glass in particular, it can contain up to 28% lead by weight, as we said. Our leaded glass is removed through a cutting process where it's manually separated. And you saw in the previous slide, safety is so important with this stuff, as Natasha sort of alluded to. In when you're handling glass, there can be dust, there can be all sorts of hazards. And when cutting glass, there's a lot of hazards. So we have, you know, pretty strict rules around PPE, and also blood lead level testing is mandatory at our facility, because these are the sorts of hazards that occur with leaded glass handling. So the leaded glass and the panel glass are separated. The leaded glass is consolidated and then shipped to Port Pirie in South Australia. There's a facility there called Nearstar. It's a lead smelter. And the lead itself is manufactured into new products, which can include lead solder wire. So for sort of doing small welds on little componentry and that kind of thing. just this year, I discovered that some of the lead that we send off is actually used to make bullets and ammunition and that kind of thing. So that's quite an interesting sort of counterpoint. Obviously, there's the positive environmental impact, but maybe the negative impact of bullets being created. So that's a bit of an interesting philosophical question. And then medical devices are another application for the lead that's produced from our leaded glass. In terms of the overall amounts, we have recycled 520 tonnes of leaded glass since 2015, which represents about 3% of the total e-waste waste stream, which is quite interesting. Moving on to that non-leaded or panel glass. So this is the glass that sits at the front of the screen that the images is projected through. You can see it's basically just very thick, heavy-duty plate glass. We ship this locally to Product Recovery Solutions, where it's crushed and manufactured, which is essentially sort of a downcycling process into road base. Unfortunately, we don't really have access to, well, it's not actually really appropriate to send this to facilities to get turned into glass bottles again. It could get turned into CRTs again, but unfortunately, no one's really buying them anymore. Well, fortunately or unfortunately. So the only real place for this product is in road base, and to be honest, road base has its place like everything else. And yeah, that's just where that goes. 820 tonnes of glass has been recycled through this process since 2015, and this glass is making up 5% of our total e-waste stream. That being said, the CRT is a declining waste stream. So this product that we're getting so much glass from and value from a recycling perspective is, as you can imagine, slowly declining. Well, significantly declining, you would think, looking at this graph here. And at this stage, there's obviously no new CRTs being produced. They're being used less and less, and we should expect to see CRTs completely disappear eventually. And then at that point, there'll just be slides on a PowerPoint. In closing, the glass recycling challenges, and these are really just recycling challenges at the end of the day, when we think about what our products are made of and how we interact with products, in the consumer market. Design issues where materials that are used that have no recycling value in products, that's a big challenge. Another big challenge in terms of design issues is where materials are used which are difficult to remove or to recover cleanly. A good example from our discussions today has been that liquid paperboard, a combination of all different types of materials into one product, very difficult to separate. If I can give you an example of one of our challenging materials, it's the laminated glass that sits at the front of a flat screen TV. That's essentially plastic and glass interfused, and it's just a very difficult and unvaluable product that just goes to landfill. And finally, it's really just our consumer behavior that's enabled by a sort of indifferent market that's just going to follow the highest dollar and not really consider the environmental impact. So single-use bottles, single-use electronics, and single-use attitudes are a big issue when it comes to environmental impact and the circular economy. Yeah, I said single-use electronics. Obviously, there's no single-use electronics, but there are very limited use electronics out there. You might get a toaster from Kmart that's good for about a few months, and then you throw it out because it's so cheap. This is just one example of the sort of throwaway culture that we need to really move away from as a society. If we want to see some real change from an environmental standpoint. That was all from me. Thanks for your time, and I'll take some questions. My email's there if anyone wants to send me an email. Thanks.
That was so good. Thank you, Evan.
Oh, cool.
That was great. All right, so just checking the chat. See, feel free to type any questions you might have for Evan in terms of recycling or recovering glass through e-waste. So Georgia Ryan has asked, vapes, do you have a solution for these?
Sorry, my video. You know, I was going to bring up vapes when I said single-use electronics, but I thought, you know, with the high school kids present, maybe I shouldn't. Yeah, look, vapes are a real problem. They're a really massive problem because we do deal with small electronics that contain embedded batteries, albeit it is that they're a challenge in and of themselves. The challenge with a vape is it's a small device with a built-in battery that's not easy to remove, but it's also got a chamber containing nicotine in it, which is like a toxic, like biohazardous material. So to sort of, I can't really directly answer the question because I have sort of put a proposal to someone that was looking for a solution where I just said, look, we'll take them on a trial basis and charge this much to sort of test and see if it's something we can develop a process around. But really, it's going to be a manual disassembly task. We don't have any plant or equipment that can take anything that's got batteries in it as they are, because the battery has a charge. It's going to go off and be essentially a flare through our plant. It's an issue that faces the whole waste industry, especially MRFs. I'm sure you'd agree. So no, there's not really a solution for them. I think that the manufacturers have a heap to answer for on them because there's just no effort put into to have a solution there. So sorry for the long-winded answer.
Absolutely, no, that's good. Thank you. Okay, so from the John Curtin crew, what are the most common products that you get through at Total Green with the advance in technology? Oh, sorry, I think that's a different question. So yeah, what are the most common products that you get through at Total Green?
So the number one product we get by weight is flat screens, definitely. I guess they're the sort of heaviest and most commonly turned over, electrical product in the market. From flat screens, the next one down is printers and copier devices, because we have a lot of post commercial printers coming through our facility here. So if you think of the large copier devices that you'd see in an office, we get many hundreds of those, a fortnight, and they weigh about 100 kilos each. So that's another very big stream that we get in. But flat screens are the biggest one. Yeah.
Right. And so another question, with the advance in technology, are there any devices being made with more recyclable materials?
Unfortunately, not really in my experience. One of the things I've observed with electronics is there's a lot more handheld devices. There's a lot more portable devices now containing explosive lithium batteries. This is a big challenge as devices become smaller. It doesn't seem like there's enough effort being put into having a design where it's easily separated or easily taken apart for good recycling outcomes. So I'd say that the answer's not really. I think with the advance in technology, items are just becoming smaller, except for flat screen TVs, obviously. But everything else is pretty much just becoming smaller and containing batteries, and therefore more difficult to deal with, if anything. Yeah.
Absolutely. And just to elaborate on batteries as well, please don't put any types of batteries in your curbside bins as well, because yes, they can start fires. Even in the back of a waste truck, they can start a fire. All they need is a bit of pressure added to them, and then there's your fire. So it's really important to collect up your batteries at home and take them to a drop-off point where they can be safely recycled and recovered. You can check the Recycle Right website or the app, which has a Find My Nearest option. You can type in your address, click the item you're looking to return, such as batteries, and it will actually bring up a list of your nearest drop-off points as well. So another question from Pam. So does Total Green recycle the steel and aluminium containers for change lids, or do they send them onto another metal recycler?
Yeah, so the only actual metal recycling where metal is getting accepted, put through a furnace and turned into new metal products, my understanding is the only locations in Australia where that's happening are, there's a few. It's definitely happening in South Australia. There's at least Arium and Nearstar are doing the lead smelting that I talked about. Steel, there's steel plants in New South Wales as well. I think there's a couple still. There was a steel plant in WA. I don't know when that stopped operating. It would have been over a decade ago, maybe decades ago. So we do recycle those products, the alley lids and the steel. That goes through our local scrap metal partner, and yeah, they're sent overseas for further processing. And yeah, they'll just be sent to an overseas smelter wherever that might be. We do downstream vendor assessment each year, where we actually do an assessment process with our recycling partners, and we do our best to do due diligence. But like with anything, it is sent overseas, and I think as a society, there's just sort of a general kind of responsibility that we're accepting that we're doing that, but we do have processes in place to do downstream assessment. Yeah.
Great. And just another question there. Would Total Green consider recycling tablet blister packs?
Oh, yep. Yes, as in I've realized what that is. I don't know enough about it. My heart says no, to be honest, just because it's not really like any product we deal with. Again, it's a bit like that liquid paperboard, because it's just going to be aluminium and plastic combined together in with some kind of glue or adhesive or heat process, and that's probably going to require some kind of heating or that kind of thing to separate. And one of the biggest issues you have in recycling is if you're recycling something that's lightweight, that could be a real challenge. So I don't want to say it's a miracle, but it's really impressive that the lids is happening, because it's such a lightweight and tiny product. So hats off to Containers for Change and Natasha for making it happen.
Just on that, there are some companies in Australia that are developing blister pack recycling, and there are some collection points I know that are starting to be established. So just watch the landscape for that one, because there is some innovation going on in that space. It is one of probably the biggest ones that TerraCycle collect. They were collecting them, but there are some other alternatives that are coming on board that I've heard about and have been researching. So yeah, just watch this space, because there are definitely innovations happening.
It's good to know. That's exciting.
Sounds like Total Green won't need to consider it then. So I'm happy with that.
You can dodge that one.
Yeah.
So from Melanie, where do you get your recycling from at Total Green? Is it through council tips or private industry?
Yeah. I get asked this question a lot. Our primary source of e-waste, like most wastes, it's the default sort of owner of that waste is council. So I think I normally say about 70% of our e-waste comes through council collection events or depots or transfer stations, landfills, all that kind of thing. maybe 25% through, business to business, relationships and commercial arrangements, and then say 5% through charitable organisations. Those are very rough numbers, but yeah, primarily through local government.
Great. All right. I think that's all the questions that have come through, and we have gone a bit over time, so I think we might wrap it up there. But thank you again to all the presenters today, Brendan, Evan, and Natasha. That was really great. And thanks everyone for tuning in today and asking questions. Thank you to all the students that were watching as well. Happy National Science Week and happy Friday. So yeah, thank you everyone. We're going to sign off now.
Thanks, Jared. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you very much.
See ya.
See
Bye.
you.